In this video, I'm going to go over 3 common reasons for a lead side slide to occur in a golf swing. I'm also going to uncover a 4th hidden reason that as we all age, we may start to deal with a little bit more. Plus, I'm going to incorporate some drills and some real-life examples to help you improve your ball striking. So let's get to work. So let's first answer the question, what is a lead side slide or a lead side sway in the golf swing? It occurs when a player has a fairly decent move to the top of their swing. Now, I'm not referring to where the club goes, a little foreshadowing there. I'm referring to the rotation or the movement of the pelvis as the club gets to the top. So we have to look at everything from the point of view of the center of pelvis. So if I have a dot on the center of pelvis right here, I do not want that dot as the club gets to the top of my swing to drift more than say an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches at most. So this particular player does a good job at that. Now, where the problem occurs is in the transition and the downswing. That's where that dot, or the center of pelvis, slides way too much towards the target. This is going to wreak havoc in rotation. You're not going to be able to rotate. Early extension and ultimately impact. You're not going to strike the golf ball consistently. You're going to have struggles with face control, angle of attack, where you strike it on the face, arc depth, you name it. Now, you can also, I always say unfortunately, mix in a well-timed move and hit actually a halfway decent shot, but you can't rely on timing, especially if you play under any pressure situations, and that may be just playing a little match against your buddies. So before we go any further, I do have a question for you, and I want your feedback. What is the thing that you struggle with the most in this game? It can be something mechanical in your swing. It could be something physical in your body. It could be something due to course management. I don't care what it is, but I want to know. Comment below, let me know. I'm going to produce some videos because I want to be able to help you out there. This channel is about you. I want to help you as the golfer. So comment below, let me know, and I'm going to get to work. So let's get on to number 1. What is the first reason why players create this lead side slide, and how do we fix it? In my 25 years of teaching, I've seen thousands of golfers that struggle with some sort of a sway in their golf swing, and not all sways are born equal. So that's why there's a lot of different cause and effects for different types of sways. But the first thing that I'm going to get into here has to do with the setup. And I reference the setup in most of my videos because if the setup is not good, and I've said it before, everything else is going to be a compensation for that thing that is not good in the setup. In theory, this one particular thing is easy to change, but if you deal with the 4th thing I'm going to talk about today, this actually may be a struggle, even though it seems fairly easy. A lot of golfers struggle with a lead side sway because they have too wide of a stance. When you have too wide of a stance, your center of pelvis is far away from your braces. So your braces, your legs are braces. They brace energy, they brace momentum. Now, you can still have a player, like I said at the beginning, that has a good move to the top relative to minimal drift or pelvis slide, but there is a long ways to get this guy to where that brace is. So you'll see a lot of this move in a swing when someone has too wide of a stance. And the second thing that happens when a player has too wide of a stance, and this goes for irons or drivers, the ball position, relatively speaking, gets moved more forwards. Why? Because the body is moving forwards to begin with. So in order to mathematically and geometrically hit the ball and get the club back to a halfway decent position, you have to move the ball forward to match the circle of the swing that you're producing. Now, the problem is you're feeding the beast when the ball position moves forward. Yes, You may strike the ball a little bit better that way overall, but you're never gonna fix the root because the stance is wide, the ball's forward, you now have to go forwards in order to hit that golf ball. So we have to make sure our stance width is not getting too wide. Every golfer is a little bit different when it comes to what is optimal width. And that's where doing these types of videos are a bit challenging on my end because I'm not referencing you, the exact golfer that's watching it right now. But what I'm hoping is with this knowledge, you can go out there and check on your stance width and maybe play around a little bit with your stance width and see how it affects this type of motion in your golf swing. But as a general rule, with those irons, I want to make sure that the feet are basically underneath your shoulders, give or take a little bit. You need some width, obviously, because the golf swing is fast. There's a lot of forces. There's a lot of energy being transferred. So you need to have a brace down below. You need to have stability. But like I said, if we get too wide, the body's gonna want to move this way into that lead side brace, even if you do have a good backswing. So do not neglect your basics, please. Let's move on to number 2. So that first reason had everything to do with the setup, and I always start with the setup pieces because obviously the setup and your address position happens before the dynamics and the movement piece of the golf swing. Reasons 2 and 3 both have to do with the dynamics of the swing. The second reason why I see a lot of players struggle with this lead side slide is because of a poor backswing. And what I mean by a poor backswing, not all poor backswings are made the same, but what I mean by a poor backswing here is where the club and the hands get too inside and too deep behind the player. Now, essentially what's gonna happen here is one or two things. The player's either gonna go way out and come over the top. That's not what we're dealing with here. So that if you do that and then come over the top, most likely you're not necessarily going to slide forward. You're probably gonna hang back on your back foot. That's another video for another day. So make sure you subscribe if you're not a subscriber because I have one of those coming up. This is for the player that gets the hands deep and then they transition from back there. A lot of times this occurs with a player that's trying to swing the club from the inside. So what I mean by inside is if we have a 0-degree line to the target here, that's the player that's trying to keep everything on the inside of that line, maybe trying to hit a draw, maybe trying to correct a slice. But what ultimately happens is when the hands get too deep and they come back to the golf ball from that depth position, the body gets in the way essentially. So if I have a ball here and I get to that deep position, my body is in the way. So what does my body have to do? My body has to get out of the way to create space to at least deliver athletically the club to the golf ball. So you'll notice when I did that, when I created space, where did my body go? My pelvis went towards the target. I'm not gonna be able to rotate properly from there. My impact is gonna get sloppy. I'm probably gonna have some early extension, excess side bend. Back issues can occur at that point. A lot of things can happen at that point. But a lot of it does come from the player that's trying to swing more from the inside, and that hand path just gets too deep behind them as they swing. So I have a good drill here to work on that. And it's really, you have to get that backswing better. You have to get your hand position better at the top in order to give yourself a chance to have the hands remain in front of you as you're swinging. And I'll show you from this angle. So if I get into a good position at the top, I'm not too deep, I now have space for the hand path to work in front and move to the left around. So my body does not have to get out of the way. So I can start to work on my proper pressure shift, my proper A lot of people know it as a weight shift. I did a full complete video on a weight shift, on the pressure shift. I'll put a link in the description below. That's also going to be tied into the third reason. So here's a very, very good awareness drill. So take one of those snow stakes, alignment rods. You can stick it into the ground. My ground is concrete here, so I can't stick it into the ground. But I have this plate down below. If any of you have any type of a studio at home, whether it's in the garage, a mat into a net, no matter what it is, I highly recommend one of these plates to put the stick in. You can do many different things with it, but for this purpose here, it works fantastic. If you're on the range, if you're outside in the backyard, just take one of these snow stakes you can get at Home Depot, stick them in the ground, put it at a slight angle. And what this is going to create is it's going to create some spatial awareness. So I cannot get my hand path to go too far inside because I'm going to hit the stick. So it really works on the space that the club is working in. If you get this piece better, you now have a chance to move on to the next step, which is allowing your body to understand the proper pressure shifts and create the proper pressure shift, and ultimately eliminate a lot of that lead side slide and get you hitting the ball better. Now, I'm a data guy and a stats nerd by nature, and I really wish I had this data, but if I could go back to 1999 when I started teaching and coaching and literally kept track of every single student's biggest struggle, this is probably in the top 3 overall, because this influences so many things. And yes, it is influencing the lateral slide as well, but it is producing a proper pressure shift or a proper weight shift. I like to refer to it as a pressure shift. A lot more players understand it a little bit better when I talk about it that way. Like I said before, I did a full video on the pressure shift, kind of a complete guide to a pressure shift, and I do encourage everybody to watch that. I will put a link down below. I'm not going to go in depth here from start to finish, but I am going to attack the one thing in that pressure shift sequence that golfers struggle with that do lead to the lateral slide. So when you make a golf swing, as the club goes back and you create rotation, the pressure goes from your right side, so pressure as in the force down into the ground. The pressure goes from the right side into the lead side pretty early. In reality, with most players, and again, I always have to throw this caveat out, there are players that this doesn't necessarily pertain to, and there's wiggle room here. But majority of players, the pressure shift is extremely out of place, out of order. So that's why I go to kind of this is where it has to be. But again, we're never going to perfect anything, but if we're close to where we need to be, we're going to be better off. So as that club goes back and I create rotation in, I want to feel pressure going into the lead side. So pressure is working down. I refer to that as the fall. So as I get to the top of the swing, I'm falling into the ground. What most players do, and I know I'm generalizing, they go towards the target. So their force, they're moving their mass, their center of mass, the center of pressure, or their center of pelvis. They're moving it towards the target in the downswing because they know they have to get their weight over here in order to compress the golf ball. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is if they're not thinking about it properly, if they're not thinking about moving the pressure into the ground, what ends up happening is this slide. So we have to create proper pressure shifts at the proper time. We need to be able to get into the ground early. From there, we've now created a brace. We are a brick wall at this point to now work up and rotate around. If I'm going here, everything is now outside of my front foot. I've lost that ability to brace. I've lost that ability to withhold all of this force. So what ends up happening? a lot of flipping, ultimately just a lot of poor contact and a lot of weak contact. You lose a lot of power when we drift this way. I had a lesson early this morning. This is what we were working on. We gained 4 miles an hour of club head speed with his 7-iron, just like that, by getting him to understand that piece of the puzzle and getting rid of this piece of the puzzle. So you have to understand the pressure shift. You have to understand where that pressure is moving and at what point in the golf swing. I encourage you, go watch that other video. I'll put a link up here right now. Just watch the rest of the video before you go to it. And I want you to watch that because that will give you a step-by-step from the address position all the way through the swing, not just this little snippet of it. But you have to have a proper pressure shift in order to minimize how much that pelvis works towards the target. So in order to improve this, I have a couple tools that I use as a drill that you can do at home as well. Where did I put them? I'll be right back. Found them. So the first tool I use is actually a training aid. It's called the Power Shift board. And essentially what it does is it has this little spring and base on the front. And when you apply pressure in your transition, it creates this audible click. And it basically says, yep, you've applied pressure into the ground on the lead side. And when you hear it click, you know when you applied that pressure as well. Now, if you laterally slide, there's actually no click because there's not enough force being pushed down into the ground. So it gives you that audible trigger. It does some other things as well, but specifically for what we're talking about today, this is what I use it for. So I get the player to feel the fall, create the click. And if they're sliding, the click doesn't happen because I'm not applying the same amount of force into the ground. Now this thing, off the top of my head, I'll put a link down below to it. $100? Question mark, give or take. Now, if you don't want to spend the $100, which I don't blame you, you can take a pool noodle. You've seen this, if you watch my videos, you've seen this little chunk of pool noodle a lot. I use this for many things. Now, what you can use this for here is put it underneath your lead foot. And what you want to do is, as you get to the top of your swing, you just want to squish it. Almost like it is a sponge and you're squishing the water out. Now again, if I move laterally, I'm not applying the same force into the ground, so you're not going to squish it. You're not going to get all that water out. Plus what both of these drills do, they create intentions. So your intentions change a little bit. So the intention with the board is to create the click. The intention with the sponge or the pool noodle is to create the squish. Intentions change things. When we change our perspectives and when we change our intentions, we can make some pretty good strides in this game. So let's move on to the fourth thing. So the fourth and final thing I'm going to talk about here really can prevent you from doing any of these things. And that is if you have any type of mobility issues, if you have any injuries you're dealing with. As we get older in age, unfortunately, these things happen more often. Mobility issues happen more often. If we are tight, if we're dealing with hip issues, if we're dealing with really anything, our body is going to restrict a lot of these rotations and forces and torques because it is a lot easier to move this way and this way. And quite frankly, I've worked with a lot of players over the years that I've had to adapt more of a Jimmy Ballard style lateral type of golf swing because it took pressure off their back. It took pressure off of the mobility issues that they are dealing with and the injuries that they're dealing with. My job as a coach is a problem solver. I need to figure out what your problem is and the best plan of attack to go forward. And sometimes I have to go around the norm and what is robotically or technically the right way to hit a golf ball. I always laugh when I hear someone say, this is the right way. There's a lot of ways to hit a golf ball. Yes, there are more efficient ways. There's no question. And that's why I focus on a lot of those efficient ways. But not everybody can do this. So if you deal with mobility issues, number one, if you can get them better, work on that. Get them better. Find a physical therapist. Find a TPI specialist that can get you on the right track to get those things better. But if they are things that just won't get better, then we got to figure out a way to hit the golf ball to the best of your ability and get you to play the best golf you possibly can. And that may be going down non-traditional roads of swinging a golf club. You know, if you do know Rocco Mediate, Rocco's dealt with back issues his life, and he changed his golf swing to be more of a lateral motion and still played a lot of really great golf. Now again, he's highly skilled. He's highly club to ball skilled, and he could probably move, you know, a couple different ways and still be very, very, very elite. But my whole point is, if you can't physically do something, the other things that I talked about, you might not be able to do, and you may be chasing your tail trying to get better at those things. Find somebody that can help you out. And a little shameless plug. Yes, I do a lot of remote coaching. This is one of the things that I look at in a remote coaching session. I try to use all available resources I can to figure this stuff out. So if you are interested, I'll put a link down below to that as well. Our goal is to always be improving. Perfection is unattainable, improvement is. Let's do it.